I'm Barbara, 32 female. I live in a city that prides itself on reinvention, in a small but meticulously organized apartment that has always been my sanctuary from the world. As a senior brand manager for a major cosmetics company, my life was a whirlwind of product launches, market analysis, and creative campaigns. It was demanding, but it was mine, a career I had built brick by brick, entirely on my own terms. Then, in the blink of an eye, it was all gone, and I found myself entangled in a web of deceit so personal and calculated it threatened to unravel everything I thought I knew about my own family. This is the story of how my father, a man I respected and admired, systematically sabotaged my career to force me into a life he had chosen for me, and how I used the very skills he underestimated to reclaim my future. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. The meeting invitation was titled Strategic Realignment Session. It was bland, corporate, and utterly non-threatening. I walked into the 14th floor conference room with a soy latte in one hand and my tablet in the other, ready to defend my team's Q3 budget proposals. I wasn't prepared for the sight that greeted me. The grim-faced trio of our VP of Marketing, the new head of HR, and a senior legal counsel I'd only ever seen in company-wide emails. There was no projector, no whiteboard with scrawled ideas. There was only a single, crisp white envelope sitting in the middle of the polished mahogany table, my name typed neatly on the front. My stomach plummeted. In the corporate world, an envelope is never good news. "Barbara, please have a seat," the VP said, his usual booming voice reduced to a stilted murmur. They used words like restructuring, synergies, and difficult decisions. It was a masterclass in saying nothing while delivering a devastating blow. My position, along with my entire brand division, was being eliminated, effective immediately. 20 minutes later, I was standing by my desk, a cardboard box in my hands, while a security guard watched me pack up 5 years of my life. My team members, my friends, floated by with expressions of shock and pity. They offered hollow condolences, promising to stay in touch, but we all knew the reality. In this industry, out of sight was truly out of mind. The walk from the office building to the subway station felt like a mile-long trek through a foreign country. The city sounds, the blaring horns, the distant sirens, the chatter of passers-by were muted as if I were listening through cotton. I felt a strange sense of detachment, a dizzying unreality. I had done everything right. I'd hit every target, exceeded every metric. I'd sacrificed weekends and evenings, poured my creativity and passion into building brands that people loved. And for what? To be reduced to a line item on a spreadsheet, a casualty of a strategic realignment. When I finally got home, the silence of my apartment was deafening. I dropped the box on the floor, the contents rattling with a pathetic finality. I sank onto my sofa, the carefully curated throw pillows offering no comfort. The first person I thought to call was my father. Arthur Wexler was a titan in the marketing world. He had built his agency, Wexler and Associates, from the ground up, turning it into a prestigious, if somewhat old-fashioned, institution. He was brilliant, charismatic, and demanding. Growing up, our dinner table conversations were less about school and friends and more about campaign slogans and market demographics. He had always been my biggest champion and my harshest critic. He pushed me, challenged me, and instilled in me the relentless drive that had propelled my career. I dialed his number, my hands trembling slightly. He picked up on the second ring. "Barbara, how's my star brand manager?" The cheerfulness in his voice made the words catch in my throat. "Dad," I started, my voice cracking. I was laid off today." There was a pause on the other end of the line. I expected shock, maybe anger on my behalf. Instead, his tone was calm, almost measured. "Oh, darling, I'm so sorry to hear that. These big corporations, they have no loyalty. It's a brutal business." He sighed dramatically. "Well, you know what this means, don't you? It's a sign." I frowned. A sign of what? "A sign that it's time to come home," he said smoothly. "The door at Wexler and Associates is always open for you. "You're a brilliant marketer, Barbara. Imagine what we could do together. It's your legacy, after all." This was his lifelong dream, me, by his side, eventually taking over the family business. It was a conversation we'd had 100 times. I had always gently but firmly refused. I loved my father, but his style was not mine. He believed in print ads, handshake deals, and 3 martini lunches. I believed in digital analytics, social media engagement, and data-driven strategy. More importantly, I needed to prove to myself, and to him, that I could succeed on my own merit without the Wexler name opening doors for me. "Dad, I appreciate the offer, I really do, but I need a minute to process this. I'm going to update my resume and start looking. I'll land on my feet," I said, trying to convince myself as much as him. Of course," he said, his voice dripping with paternal indulgence. "You take all the time you need, but the offer stands, always. This isn't an ending, Barbara, it's a new beginning." We hung up and I felt a fresh wave of despair wash over me. His reaction hadn't been comforting. It felt opportunistic. He hadn't asked for details about the layoff. He hadn't cursed my former employers for their stupidity. He had simply, immediately, presented his own solution, the one that benefited him. I shook the thought away, blaming it on my own raw emotions. He was my father. He loved me. He was just trying to help in the only way he knew how. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark, the city lights twinkling outside my window, and felt a profound sense of loss. It wasn't just about the job, it was about the identity I had so carefully constructed. I was Barbara Wexler, Senior Brand Manager. Without that title, who was I? The question terrified me. The era of my hard-won independence was over. And as I sat there, replaying my father's calm, almost rehearsed-sounding response in my head, a tiny, unsettling seed of doubt began to sprout in the back of my mind. It was a feeling I couldn't yet name, a whisper of unease that something was not quite right. But in the depths of my professional grief, I dismissed it as paranoia. I had no idea that this was not a new beginning, but the start of a war for my own life. The end of that era was just the first move in a game I didn't even know I was playing. The first few weeks of unemployment were a blur of forced productivity. I treated the job hunt like a full-time job, just as all the career advice blogs recommended. My mornings were spent scouring LinkedIn, Indeed, and industry-specific job boards. My afternoons were dedicated to tailoring my resume and cover letter for each application, transforming myself into the perfect candidate for a dozen different companies. I networking over coffee, attended virtual industry mixers, and polished my professional portfolio until it gleamed. I was determined to prove my father wrong, to show him, and myself, that the layoff was a minor setback, not a career-ending catastrophe. My father, for his part, played the role of the doting parent perfectly. He called every evening, his voice a smooth blend of concern and encouragement. "How did the hunt go today, darling?" he'd ask. "Any bites?" I would dutifully recount my day's efforts. I had a great preliminary chat with a recruiter from a beverage company. Or, I sent in an application for a dream job at a new tech startup. His responses were always the same. "That's wonderful, Barbara, just wonderful, but don't burn yourself out. Remember, you have a safety net, a golden one at that." The golden safety net was Wexler and Associates. He would casually mention a new client they'd landed, or a challenge they were facing that only my brilliant daughter could solve. He painted a picture of a gilded cage, a comfortable, prestigious prison where I would be celebrated and valued, but ultimately under his control. Each mention felt less like an offer and more like a slow, steady erosion of my resolve. He was a master marketer, and I was his target demographic. His campaign was designed to wear me down, to make his solution seem not just appealing, but inevitable. My mother, Eleanor, was a more subtle player in this family drama. A retired art history professor, she valued beauty, tradition, and above all, harmony. She hated conflict. When I would vent to her about my frustrations with the job search, she would listen patiently, her expression sympathetic. "I know it's difficult, dear," she'd say, patting my hand. "But your father just wants what's best for you. He's so proud of you, he just wants you close. She saw his manipulation as love, his control as concern. In her eyes, fighting against him was like fighting against the tide, pointless and exhausting. Why struggle in the cold, rough sea of the corporate world when there was a warm, safe harbor waiting for me? A month turned into 2, and the initial flood of recruiter calls and first-round interviews slowed to a trickle, then stopped altogether. It was baffling. My resume was strong, my experience impeccable. I was getting positive feedback on my applications, often making it to the second or third round of interviews. I would have fantastic conversations with hiring managers and department heads. They'd be enthusiastic, using phrases like, "We're very impressed." "And you're a top contender." Then, silence. A polite, soul-crushing rejection email would arrive a week later with no specific feedback. "We've decided to move forward with another candidate who more closely fits our needs at this time." The rejections started to pile up, each one a small cut that, taken together, were bleeding my confidence dry. I started to second-guess everything. Was I coming on too strong in interviews? Was my portfolio not as impressive as I thought? Was I, at 32, already aged out of the fast-paced marketing world? The doubt my father had so carefully planted began to take root. Maybe he was right. Maybe the industry didn't want me anymore. My best friend, Jessica, was my only lifeline to sanity. A cybersecurity analyst with a mind like a steel trap and a zero-tolerance policy for nonsense, she refused to let me spiral. We met for our weekly wine and wine session at our favorite downtown bar. I slumped into the booth, defeated. "Another one bit the dust," I sighed, sliding a crumpled rejection letter across the table. "That's the 5th final round rejection in 6 weeks, Jess. 5. There's something wrong with me." Jessica smoothed out the letter, her sharp eyes scanning the generic text. She took a slow sip of her Malbec. "No, there's not something wrong with you. There's something wrong with this. It doesn't add up. You're the most competent, driven person I know. Companies should be fighting over you." She tapped a perfectly manicured nail on the table. "Let's go over it again. The process is always the same. You ace the interviews, they love you, they ask for your references, and then, poof." "Exactly," I said, swirling the dregs of my own wine. "I give them my reference list. My old boss, a former colleague who's now at a director level, and my father." Jessica's eyes narrowed slightly. "You have your dad on there, still." I shifted uncomfortably. "Well, yeah, he's Arthur Wexler. His name carries a lot of weight. He's always given me glowing reviews. He coached me on it when I got my first internship. He said it was important to show I came from a marketing dynasty." The words sounded hollow and naive as they left my mouth. "A marketing dynasty," Jessica repeated flatly. She leaned forward, her voice dropping. "Barb, be honest with me. How much pressure is he putting on you to join his firm?" "Constant," I admitted, my voice barely a whisper. "It's his favorite topic. Every phone call, every dinner. He talks about the succession plan, about the Wexler legacy. He makes it sound like my destiny." "It sounds like a trap," she said bluntly. "And this," she waved the rejection letter, "feels like the bait." I wanted to defend him. I wanted to say she was being paranoid, that my father, for all his controlling tendencies, would never actively sabotage me. He was my dad. He wanted me to be successful. The problem was, his definition of success was becoming increasingly clear. Success on his terms, in his company, under his roof. Anything outside of that was not just a different path, it was a betrayal. That evening, my father called, right on schedule. "Anything new to report, darling?" I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. "Actually, yes, I was rejected by the tech startup today, the one I was really excited about." He made a sympathetic sound. "Oh, what a shame. Their loss, I'm sure. We just signed that new luxury hotel chain I was telling you about. They're looking for a fresh brand strategy. It's a project that has your name written all over it. The office is here for you, Barbara. The team is here for you. You wouldn't have to deal with these flaky startups and their fickle hiring managers." The walls of the gilded cage felt like they were closing in. His timing was too perfect, his solutions too neat. The job offer wasn't a life raft, It was an anchor designed to pull me down into his world. The comfort he offered felt suffocating, the security he promised felt like a sentence. I looked around my apartment, the one symbol of my independence, and for the first time, it felt less like a sanctuary and more like a temporary holding cell. I was being expertly and methodically corralled, and the scary part was, it was working. My savings were dwindling, and my hope was fading right along with them. The question was no longer if I would have to surrender, but when. The turning point came on a Tuesday afternoon. It was gray and drizzling outside, a perfect match for my mood. I had just received another rejection, this time from a company called Innovate Dynamics, a cutting-edge firm I'd been through 4 rounds of interviews with. The final interview with the director of marketing, Sarah Jenkins, had been incredible. We de-clicked instantly, talking for nearly 2 hours about brand theory, market disruption, and creative strategy. She had all but offered me the job on the spot, telling me to expect a formal offer from HR by the end of the week. That was 10 days ago. The email I received today was the familiar, sterile template of regret. Despondent and frustrated, I decided to do something I'd never done before. I was going to ask for feedback. The worst they could do was ignore me. I found Sarah Jenkins on LinkedIn and composed a carefully worded message, thanking her for her time and expressing my disappointment. I ended by politely asking if she would be willing to share any feedback that might help me in my ongoing search. I hit send and immediately regretted it, feeling unprofessional and desperate. To my astonishment, she replied within the hour. "Barbara," the message began, "can you talk? I'm free for a few minutes." She included her direct office number. My heart hammered against my ribs. I took a few deep breaths and dialed the number before I could lose my nerve. Sarah Jenkins speaking. "Hi, Sarah, it's Barbara Wexler," I said, my voice a little shaky. "Thank you so much for getting back to me." "Of course," she said, and her tone was strange. It wasn't the brisk, professional voice from the interview. It was hesitant, almost conspiratorial. "Listen, Barbara, I'm probably breaking about 10 different HR protocols right now, but your message caught me at a weird moment. I felt I owed you more than that form letter." I waited, holding my breath. "You were our top candidate," she said flatly. "It wasn't even close. My team was thrilled. I was personally drafting your offer letter last Monday when HR forwarded me an email you had sent." My mind went blank. An email I sent? I haven't emailed your HR department since I sent my reference list. "Exactly," she said, and I could hear the confusion in her own voice. "The email was a formal withdrawal of your candidacy. It was polite, professional. It said that you had received and accepted another offer that was more aligned with your long-term career goals. It wished us the best of luck in our search. To be honest, we were all completely blindsided. I was disappointed, but I wished you well." The air left my lungs in a sudden whoosh. I had to grip the edge of my kitchen counter to stay upright. "Sarah, I never sent that email. I would never have withdrawn. This was my dream job." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could hear the faint clicking of a keyboard. "I'm looking at it right now," she said slowly. "It came from the email address you have listed on your resume, Barbara Wexler at email.com. "That's my email," I whispered, my blood turning to ice. "But I didn't send it. I swear to you, I did not send that email." I frantically opened my laptop, navigating to my sent folder, my hands shaking so badly I could barely type my password. I scrolled through the dates. Nothing. No email to Innovate Dynamics HR. No withdrawal. It wasn't there. "Could you have been hacked?" Sarah asked, her voice now filled with genuine concern. I don't know. Maybe." The idea seemed preposterous. Who would hack my email just to decline a job offer? It made no sense. "Well, here's the other thing that struck me as odd," Sarah continued. "Before you supposedly withdrew, our HR team was doing their due diligence, checking your references. They spoke to your previous supervisor, who had nothing but amazing things to say. Then they called your second reference, Arthur Wexler." My stomach clenched. "My father." Yes, according to the notes, it was a very strange call. The HR rep said Mr. Wexler was charming but incredibly dismissive of the role. He apparently said something to the effect of, "Innovate is a fine little company, but Barbara is destined for bigger things. We're grooming her to take over the family business. This position would be, at best, a temporary detour for her." He made it sound like you weren't serious about the job, that you were just testing the waters. The carefully constructed facade of my life cracked and then shattered into a million pieces. The room started to spin. Every polite rejection, every confusing silence, every ounce of self-doubt I had been drowning in for the past 3 months suddenly clicked into a horrifying, crystal-clear picture. It wasn't me. It wasn't the economy. It wasn't bad luck. It was him. My father's calm, measured reaction to my layoff. His constant, suffocating offers. His perfectly timed remarks about my destiny at Wexler and Associates. It wasn't concern. It was a strategy. He wasn't building me a safety net. He was weaving a spider's web. "Barbara, are you still there?" Sarah's voice pulled me back from the brink. "Yes," I croaked, my throat tight with a mixture of rage and grief. "I'm here. Sarah, thank you. Thank you for telling me this. You have no idea what you've just done." "I'm so sorry, Barbara," she said softly. "For what it's worth, the position has been filled. But if anything ever opens up again, I'll be calling you directly. And I'd recommend changing your email password." We hung up and I sent. Ood frozen in my kitchen for a long time, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound. The betrayal was so immense, so audacious, it was almost incomprehensible. He hadn't just lied to me. He had actively, methodically stolen my opportunities. He had impersonated me. He had used his reputation not to lift me up, but to box me in, all while playing the part of the supportive father. He had seen my distress, my dwindling confidence, my growing despair, and he had known he was the cause of it all. He had watched me suffer and called it love. The grief was a physical blow, a hollow ache in my chest for the father I thought I had. But beneath the grief, something else was stirring. A cold, hard fury began to solidify in my gut. He thought he could break me down, make me so desperate that I would come crawling back to his gilded cage, grateful for the scraps he offered. He thought he had won, but he had made one critical miscalculation. He had raised me to be a fighter. He had taught me to be a brilliant strategist. And I was about to use every lesson he had ever taught me to tear his perfectly constructed world apart. The game was on. The rage was a fire in my veins, but I knew I couldn't act on raw emotion. My father was a master manipulator. A direct confrontation without irrefutable proof would be useless. He would twist my words, dismiss my accusations as paranoid fantasies born of unemployment stress, and paint me as an ungrateful daughter. He would make me look like the villain. No, if I was going to expose him, I needed evidence. Cold, hard, undeniable proof. My first call was to Jessica. I relayed the entire conversation with Sarah Jenkins, my voice tight and trembling with fury. Jessica listened in silence, letting me get it all out. When I finished, her response was not one of shock, but of grim confirmation. "I knew it," she said, her voice a low growl. "That condescending, controlling 'I'm so sorry, Barb, but now we burn him to the ground.'" "How?" I asked, feeling helpless. "He's covered his tracks. The email isn't in my sent folder. It's my word against his." "Amateurs cover their tracks," Jessica said, and I could practically hear her cracking her knuckles. "Professionals know that nothing in the digital world is ever truly gone. You just need to know where to look. First things first, change every single one of your passwords. Bank accounts, social media, everything. Use a password manager and enable two-factor authentication on anything that offers it. Now." I spent the next hour locking down my digital life, a frantic, paranoid energy coursing through me. Every security question I answered felt like a small victory. What was the name of your first pet? Who was your favorite teacher? The answers were relics of a more innocent time, a life before I knew I had to protect myself from my own father. Once my accounts were secured, Jessica came over. She arrived with her work laptop, a thermos of coffee, and a look of fierce determination on her face. She was in her element. "Okay," she said, setting up shop at my dining table. "Let's start with your email. He didn't send it from your computer, or it would be in your sent folder. That means he logged in from an external device. Your email provider tracks all login activity. We need to access your account's security logs. She guided me through the labyrinth of my email account security settings. And there it was. A log of every login over the past 90 days, complete with IP addresses, dates, and times. Most were from my own devices, my laptop and my phone, with IP addresses that traced back to my apartment. But there were others. Several of them, in fact. One login dated last Monday. The day the withdrawal email was sent to Innovate Dynamics originated from an IP address that Jessica quickly traced. Got it, she said, her eyes gleaming. The IP address is registered to a commercial internet provider. The physical location is, she paused for dramatic effect, the Central Business District, within a 2-block radius of Wexler and Associates. It was circumstantial, but it was a start, a strong one. That's not all, Jessica continued, her fingers flying across her keyboard. The email itself. Even if it was deleted from your sent folder, a full data export from your provider might still contain remnants of it, especially if he used a third-party application like Outlook or Apple Mail to access your account. She helped me initiate a request for a complete archive of my account data, a process that would take 24 to 48 hours. While we waited, we moved on to the next phase of the investigation, the other companies. I had a spreadsheet where I had meticulously tracked every job I had applied for. I highlighted the 5 other companies where I had made it to the final round only to be mysteriously rejected after the reference check. It's time to make some phone calls, Jessica said, but you can't be you need a pretext. Together we had a plan. Jessica, with her knowledge of corporate structures, helped me craft a script. I would call the HR departments of those 5 companies, posing as a reference checker from a fictional recruitment agency called Apex Talent Group. I claimed to be finalizing an offer for a candidate, me, and needed to verify some details from her recent job search for a security clearance check. It was audacious and risky, but my anger made me bold. The first 2 calls were dead ends. The HR assistants were polite but firm, citing company policy and refusing to share any information about past candidates. I was starting to lose hope. On the 3rd call, however, I got a break. I reached a junior HR coordinator who was young, inexperienced, and clearly overwhelmed. After I ran through my script, he put me on hold. When he came back, he was apologetic. "I'm so sorry," he said, "but I can't seem to find a file for a Barbara Wexler." "That's odd," I said, trying to sound professionally puzzled. "She interviewed 4 times with your marketing department and said she received a verbal offer before she withdrew to take another position." "Oh, the withdrawal?" he said, a note of recognition in his voice. "Yes, I remember that now. It was so strange. Her father, the famous Arthur Wexler, called our head of HR directly to let us know she wouldn't be moving forward. He was very charming, said he had finally convinced her to join the family firm. We hadn't even done the official reference checks yet. He saved us a bit of work, I suppose." I gripped the phone, my knuckles white. I thanked the young man for his time and hung up before he could hear the tremor in my voice. He had called them. He hadn't even waited for them to call him. He had preemptively torpedoed my chances. How many other times had he done this? The next day, the email from my service provider arrived. My data archive was ready for download. It was a massive file, a compressed history of my entire digital life. Jessica, the digital archaeologist, dived in. It took her hours of sifting through dense, code-like files, but eventually she let out a triumphant shout. "Bingo!" She turned her laptop screen towards me. There, buried in a log file from a third-party app sync, was the ghost of the email. It was a fragment of data, not the full message, but it contained the recipient's address, the HR coordinator at Innovate Dynamics, the subject line, "Withdrawal of candidacy, Barbara Wexler," and a timestamp that matched the suspicious login from my father's office district. Most importantly, it contained metadata showing the email was composed and sent using a version of Microsoft Outlook exclusive to enterprise-level business accounts. The kind of account used by a company like Wexler and Associates. We now had a clear, damning digital trail: the suspicious logins, the IP address, the metadata from the ghost email, the confirmation from the HR coordinator. Each piece of evidence was a nail, and I was ready to build a coffin for my father's lies. Jessica leaned back, a grimly satisfied smile on her face. "So, what's the plan, boss? Do we call a lawyer? Do we send this to him and watch him squirm?" I looked at the evidence arrayed on the screen, a monument to my father's betrayal. A simple confrontation felt too easy, too quick. Sending a lawyer after him felt impersonal. He had tried to sabotage my career, to reduce me to a helpless child dependent on him. He had attacked me in my professional arena. It was only fitting that I return the favor. "No," I said, a slow, cold smile spreading across my own face. "He wants me to be a part of the Wexler legacy. Fine, I'll give him a presentation he'll never forget." For the next 2 weeks, I lived a double life. To my parents, I was the defeated daughter, finally starting to see the wisdom of my father's advice. I let a note of weary resignation creep into my voice during our nightly calls. I told him I was reconsidering his offer, that maybe he was right about the soulless nature of the corporate world. I could almost hear the triumphant smile in his voice as he told me to take my time, that my office was waiting. He thought he had broken me. He had no idea I was building a weapon. My apartment became a war room. With Jessica as my second in command, I began to formulate a plan that was equal parts corporate strategy and personal revenge. The goal was twofold. First, to secure my own future, completely independent of my father. Second, to expose his treachery in a way that would dismantle his reputation among the people whose opinions he valued most. The first part of the plan was to get a better job than any of the ones he had stolen from me. I couldn't just re-enter the job market, I had to bypass it entirely. I needed to create an opportunity for myself. I spent days researching, not job boards, but market trends, venture capital funding announcements, and industry pain points. I identify a niche, high-end, sustainable home goods companies that had fantastic products but amateurish, outdated branding. They were getting crushed by larger competitors with slicker marketing. This was a world I understood intimately. I picked my target, a company called Artisan Home, a small, family-owned business that created beautiful, handcrafted furniture from reclaimed wood. Their craftsmanship was exquisite, but their brand was a mess. Their website looked like it was from 2005, their social media was non-existent, and their logo was an uninspired cliché. They were the anti-Wexler and Associates, all substance, no style. They were perfect. Instead of sending a resume, I spent a week creating a comprehensive, unsolicited brand revitalization proposal for Artisan Home. It was the best work of my life. I designed a new logo, mocked up a new website, and outlined a full-scale digital marketing strategy, complete with target demographics, a content calendar, and projected ROI calculations. I created a 50-page presentation that was sleek, professional, and undeniable. It wasn't an application, it was a solution. I found the name of the owner, a man named Michael Chen, and sent the entire package to him in a beautifully printed and bound portfolio, with a simple cover letter that said, "You have a great company. I can make it a great brand." While I waited for a response, Jessica and I worked on the second part of the plan, the confrontation. As I had told her, a quiet family chat wasn't going to cut it. My father's entire identity was built around his professional reputation. He was Arthur Wexler, the marketing guru, the wise patriarch, the man who built a legacy of integrity. That was the stage on which he needed to be exposed. For years, my father had hosted a lavish annual dinner for his most important clients and industry peers. It was a legendary event in the local marketing community, held at an exclusive private club. It was a night of fine dining, expensive wine, and most importantly, networking and backslapping. It was my father's kingdom, and he was the benevolent king. The event was in 3 weeks. This would be my theater. Jessica used her cybersecurity skills to do some discreet digging. She found the event planner's contact information and the schedule for the evening. The highlight of the night, after dinner, was always my father's keynote address, a state of the industry speech where he would show off his latest triumphs. He always used a projector and a large screen for his presentation. And that, Jessica said with a wicked grin, is our opening. The plan was audacious. We would create our own presentation, a detailed, evidence-backed case study of my father's sabotage campaign. We would compile the IP logs, the email metadata, the recording of my call with the HR coordinator. I had used a recording app, citing note-taking purposes, and a timeline of my job rejections correlated with my father's phone records, which Jessica managed to obtain through a very clever bit of social engineering on his mobile provider's customer service line. We would lay it all out, slide by slide, in the cold, hard language of a business report. The technical part was Jessica's domain. She explained that most event venues have notoriously lax Wi-Fi security. She was confident she could get into the local network and, with the right timing, hijack the signal to the projector, swapping my father's presentation with our own. It was a high-risk, high-reward strategy. If it worked, he would be humiliated in front of everyone who mattered to him. If it failed, I would look unhinged. 2 days before the big dinner, I got a call from an unknown number. It was Michael Chen, the owner of Artisan Home. He was, to put it mildly, blown away by my proposal. "I've been in this business for 20 years, Ms. Wexler," he said, his voice filled with awe. "No one has ever understood my vision like this. This document, it's not just a marketing plan, it's a roadmap to my company's future. I have to ask, what is it you want?" "I want to be your new director of marketing," I said, my voice steady and confident. "I don't want a salary, not at first. I want a small stipend and a percentage of the revenue growth I generate in the first year. I'm betting on myself and on your product." There was a moment of stunned silence. "You're hired," he said. "When can you start?" I hung up the phone, a feeling of pure, unadulterated triumph surging through me. I had done it. I had forged my own signature on my own terms. I had a job, a great job, one that my father had no part in, one that he didn't even know existed. Part 1 of the plan was complete. Now, for Part 2, I had my armor. It was time to go to war. I walked into the grand ballroom of the private club on my father's arm. It felt theatrical, almost surreal. I was playing the part of the prodigal daughter, returned to the fold. I wore an elegant, understated black dress. Professional, powerful, and somber. It was my battle armor. "Ah, there's my brilliant girl," my father boomed, beaming at his colleagues and introducing me around. "Barbara's finally decided to put her talents to good use and join the family firm. She'll be starting with us as a VP next month." I smiled demurely, accepting the handshakes and condescending pats on the shoulder. "I'm so excited to learn from the best," I said, looking my father directly in the eyes. His smile was one of pure, smug satisfaction. He thought this was his victory lap. He had no idea he was walking into an ambush. My mother, Elinor, drifted by, looking radiant but anxious. "Isn't this wonderful, dear?" she whispered, squeezing my hand. "Everything back in its proper place." I gave her a noncommittal smile. Her desire for a peaceful, predictable life had made her willfully blind, and while I pitied her, I couldn't let it deter me. Jessica was not at the dinner. She was 2 blocks away, sitting in a rented van packed with electronic equipment, parked where she could get a strong signal from the club's Wi-Fi network. We were in constant contact via a tiny, invisible earpiece I was wearing. "Network is a go," her voice buzzed in my ear. "I'm in. Just give me the signal." Dinner was an agonizingly slow affair. I pushed food around my plate, listening to my father hold court, telling stories, laughing, and accepting praise for his supposed business acumen. To these people, he was a pillar of the community, a man of integrity. The hypocrisy was nauseating. Finally, the plates were cleared and the lights dimmed. The host of the evening, a client of my father's, walked to the podium. And now, for a man who needs no introduction, the visionary founder of Wexler and Associates, please give a warm welcome to Arthur Wexler. A wave of applause filled the room. My father strode to the stage, looking every bit the conquering hero. He stood at the podium, basking in the adoration of his peers. Thank you, he began, his voice resonating with practiced charisma. Tonight, I want to talk about the future, about legacy, about building something that lasts. He clicked a remote to start his presentation. On the massive screen behind him, the Wexler and Associates logo appeared. That was my cue. Now, Jess, I whispered into the collar of my dress. Showtime, her voice came back through the earpiece. My father clicked to the next slide, but it wasn't his slide that appeared. The Wexler and Associates logo vanished, replaced by a simple, stark title on a black background. Project Nightingale, a case study in career sabotage, by Barbara Wexler. A confused murmur rippled through the audience. My father stared at the screen, his face a mask of disbelief. He clicked the remote again, frantically, but the slide remained. His confident smile faltered. Seems to be a small technical glitch, he stammered, trying to laugh it off. Then my voice, clear and amplified, filled the room. I had a second microphone in my purse, connected to Jessica's system. I stood up from my table. Every eye in the ballroom swiveled to me. It's no glitch, Dad, I said, my voice cold and steady as I walked towards the stage. It's my presentation. I took the remote from his stunned, limp hand. For the past 3 months, I began, addressing the captivated audience, I have been the subject of a targeted, systematic campaign of interference and sabotage designed to destroy my career prospects and force me into a position at my father's company. I clicked the remote. The next slide appeared, showing a timeline. On one side, the dates of my final round interviews. On the other, the dates of the rejections. My father, Arthur Wexler, a man you all know and respect, has been using his reputation and my trust to poison the well. He has impersonated me, lied to potential employers, and abused his position as my reference to ensure that every door I tried to open was slammed shut in my face. Click, the next slide showed the IP address logs, highlighting the logins to my personal email from his office building. Click, the metadata from the ghost email sent to Innovate Dynamics. Click, a transcript of my conversation with Sarah Jenkins. With each slide, the whispers in the room grew louder. Faces turned from me to my father, their expressions shifting from confusion to shock and then to dawning horror. My father's face had gone from tan to pale to a blotchy, furious red. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. I kept my voice calm and professional, as if I were presenting a quarterly report. I laid out the facts, one by one, weaving them into an undeniable narrative of deceit. The final piece of evidence was the audio file. And finally, I said, for anyone who still doubts the lengths my father would go to, here is a recording of him speaking to an HR coordinator, proactively withdrawing my candidacy from a job he knew I wanted. IP. Laid the audio. The polite, charming voice of Arthur Wexler filled the ballroom, confidently lying about my career intentions. The silence that followed was absolute. It was deafening. Every person in that room, his clients, his competitors, his friends, had heard the truth. My mother was staring at me, her face ashen, tears welling in her eyes. My father looked utterly broken, a fallen king on a stage of his own making. I clicked to the final slide. It was the new logo I had designed for Artisan Home. Below it, in clean, bold text, were the words, Barbara Wexler, Director of Marketing. My father's campaign was predicated on the idea that I couldn't succeed without him, I concluded, my voice ringing with a strength I didn't know I possessed. He was wrong. My presentation is over. Thank you for your time. I set the remote down on the podium and walked off the stage. I didn't look back. I walked through the silent, stunned crowd, past the gawking faces, and out of the ballroom. I didn't run. I walked with my head held high, the click of my heels on the marble floor the only sound. As the heavy doors swung shut behind me, I felt a profound sense of release. It was over. I had not just exposed his lies, I had presented my own truth on my own terms in front of his whole world. It was the presentation of a lifetime. The immediate aftermath was chaotic. My phone exploded with calls and texts from a number of people who were at the dinner. Some were messages of support and admiration from peers who had long chafed under my father's arrogant reign. Others were from his horrified clients, asking for confirmation, expressing their shock. I ignored them all. I went home, made myself a cup of tea, and for the first time in months, slept soundly through the night. The professional fallout for my father was swift and brutal. The story of his presentation ripped through the city's marketing community like a wildfire. It was the kind of spectacular, public implosion that legends are made of. In an industry built on reputation and trust, he had publicly demonstrated that he had neither. Within a week, 3 of his oldest and largest clients pulled their accounts from Wexler and Associates. The press, catching wind of the scandal from industry gossip columns, had a field day. Marketing mogul's legacy in tatters after daughter exposes deceitful family business tactics, one headline screamed. The story painted him as a manipulative relic from a bygone era, a stark contrast to the modern, data-driven world of marketing he so often derided. His empire, so carefully built over 40 years, began to crumble in a matter of days. He tried to do damage control, of course. He issued a public statement filled with vague language about a private family matter and a regrettable misunderstanding. He tried to paint me as an unstable, vindictive daughter, but the evidence was too compelling. The audio clip, leaked by someone from the dinner, went viral in our professional circles. No one believed him. My mother called me a few days later, her voice choked with tears. She begged me to retract my story, to issue a joint statement, to think of the family. "What family, Mom?" I asked, my voice devoid of heat, just weary sadness. "The family where my father systematically sabotages my life for his own selfish reasons, and you stand by and watch because you don't like conflict. That family, it's a little late to worry about its image." Our conversation was short. I knew she was a victim in her own way, trapped in a life with a narcissist, but I could no longer be collateral damage in their dysfunctional dynamic. I told her I loved her, but that I needed space. The umbilical cord was finally, irrevocably cut. I never heard from my father directly. His pride wouldn't allow it. I heard through the grapevine that he was forced to sell his crumbling agency for a fraction of its former worth. The new owners immediately rebranded it, scrubbing the Wexler name from the letterhead as if it were toxic. He and my mother retired and moved to a quiet community a few states away. His legacy, the thing he was so obsessed with preserving, was erased. Meanwhile, my own legacy was just beginning. I poured all my energy, creativity, and newfound freedom into my role at Artisan Home. Michael Chen was a dream boss, collaborative, trusting, and passionate about his craft. He gave me complete autonomy, and I ran with it. The rebranding was a massive success. We launched a new e-commerce website that was beautiful and user-friendly. Our social media campaigns, focusing on the story of the artisans and the sustainable sourcing of the wood, went viral. Sales tripled in the first 6 months. By the end of the first year, our revenue had increased by over 400%. My unorthodox hiring agreement, a small stipend plus a percentage of growth, paid off spectacularly. I made more in that first year than I would have in 5 years at my old corporate job. More importantly, I had built something real. I had taken a worthy, struggling company and helped it thrive. I hired a small team, mentored young marketers, and created a positive, innovative work culture. 2 years after that fateful dinner, Artisan Home was featured in a major design magazine. They did a profile piece on the company's incredible turnaround, focusing on me as the architect of its new success. The article called me a visionary brand builder and highlighted my unique approach to marketing. It never once mentioned my father or Wexler and Associates. My professional identity was now entirely my own, forged not by my lineage, but by my own talent and resilience. One afternoon, a package arrived at my office. It was a small, beautifully wrapped box with no return address. Inside was a single, ornately carved wooden bird, one of my father's early creations from when he was a hobbyist woodworker, long before the marketing firm. It was the one piece of his work I had always loved as a child. There was no note. I didn't know if it was an apology, a peace offering, or a final, pathetic attempt at manipulation. For a moment, I felt a pang of the old grief for the relationship we could have had. But it was fleeting. I placed the bird on my windowsill, where it caught the afternoon light. It was a reminder not of him, but of me. A reminder that you can't force someone to be a part of a legacy they don't want. A reminder that true success isn't about inheriting a name, but about building your own. My father had tried to write my story for me, to trap me within the gilded pages of his own life. But I had torn out that page and started a new chapter, a brand new legacy, all on my own. And I was just getting started.